Welcome to the Andy Noise Experience, a podcast endurance noise, random musings. It's Sunday morning, 9:30 a.m. here in Bakersfield, California. And I have the Jester. And where's the Jester today? Where are you at, Ed?
Today I am in Cleveland, Ohio at the airport, waiting for my flight, which just shouldn't leave until tomorrow afternoon.
Ooh. That's quite some.
Unfortunately, because I can't get a boarding pass, I can't check the TSA and go where they have a really nice lounge area that I can sleep in. I can't get into that. So I'm stuck out in the pre-TSA checkpoint. I'll find a place somewhere to sleep tonight, that's halfway decently comfortable. But yeah, they have a really nice area here that for people who need to sleep. It's soft couches and it's a whole quiet zone. I've never seen that at an airport, but I can't get to it.
Yeah, I had when we went to the Dome, the Alaska Dome, ages ago in 2014, after dealing with that whole race, my good friend Stacy Costa, who did the 24-hour, we hung out together and she copied your idea of because rentals there were incredibly expensive car rentals because of the cruise lines and stuff. So she went and rented a U-Haul van for her living arrangements, and it's like you rent a U-Haul van for
$19.95 a day. Yeah,
and then
gas.
And gas, and then she got some of the extra carpets, and she got some boxes, and she had a little room. So, anyways, long story, we got her van, we put that back, we took a bus down to downtown, and we hung out. We went into this one bar that was really nice, and Stacy likes to have a few, and it just kind of, and they told us, hey, you guys can hang out here as long as you want. And then finally, all the flights in Alaska all flew out late at night because of the cruises. So unfortunately, we got to the airport maybe at 2 or 3 in the afternoon, but my flight wasn't flying out till later in the evening. And the sad part was I'd been up for 6 days. Stacy was a little more with it, but she could go through TSA, and I had to wait. So I had to sit out in the outer hell. That's how I refer to it. Anchorage, Alaska, it was like nothing. There was no food court. There was nothing. So I had to sit there for hours, and it wasn't near anything, and it was just sheer agony. I just remember when I finally got to go in there and hang out with Stacy for a little while. So I feel your pain. Yeah, it's definitely like, the inner sanctum is awesome, but that outer sanctum.
The other thing. Yeah, that's the other thing. Food court. I can't get to food court, so I had to go to the little. They have one little teeny store, buy a few little items. It's
they'll have a Starbucks or something, or they'll be like one place. I mean, I get it, because unfortunately, if it was nicer, they would have total riffraff hanging around. Like I went out walking this morning with my wife, and in a 2-3 mile thing, we see many people sleeping on the sidewalks, and police department drives by quite often, but they ain't pulling them over because what are they going to do with them? They can't find them, and they don't want to certainly collect them. So so if they made the outer rim nicer, you luck out.
People hang out there all day. Yeah.
Speaking of, because we just kind of ramble on about this. So like when you go through TSA, you have the mask on, you take the mask off so they can see who you are. Or is that basically what they do? Briefly, I assume that.
Yeah, that's the only time, other than like if you are eating in the food court, you can, because they space out the tables so you can take off to eat. But you're checking in, and they're like, they have your license, okay, pull your mask down, okay, back up, and then the rest of the time mask on continuously.
Yeah, and that's here in Cleveland, but then when you were in Knoxville, Tennessee, it was different, huh?
You know what? They are different airports. Like California, it's mandatory.
Yeah,
it's not a choice, but when you go into Knoxville, it says masks are recommended. So it's not even really enforced at Knoxville. But here in Cleveland, I didn't see the signs, so I'm not sure if they're really, but everybody's got them on, and everywhere you go, it's all masked up. So,
you need to return to Cleveland. I went with Stacy a couple years ago because they have the National 24-Hour Championship there. And Stacy ended up winning her 45-49. She didn't have as good a race as she hoped, but throughout the last hours, I was just whipping her, going, "Look, you can still win a national title. Get out there and keep moving." and it was a really nice loop. The weather it rained a bit, but I definitely like to go back, and I kind of enjoyed the Cleveland thing. In fact, I just made a video from it. I've recently found out you can download all your photos from Facebook. And it takes a long time. They do it, it does it remotely on the cloud. And so if you've noticed on my Instagram feeds and stuff, there's all this old random stuff coming up. What it is it ends up filling up my Google Photos with copy of Cleveland race, copy of this, that, and the other thing. And so slowly I'm going through them, changing the titles and making little photos. And speaking of that, we're going to get on to what's going on with the weekend. I got a message yesterday, and I hate Facebook Messenger sometimes because if they're not a friend of yours, it goes into this other file that you don't always see.
Don't see, right?
And for some reason, I kind of noticed it, and I clicked on it, and it was a lady wanting to use one of my photos, a photo of you.
Oh,
and
was it for I Run Far?
Yes.
Ah,
And
and I feel really bad. I feel really bad for I don't know if her name's pronounced Liza or Lisa. It's Liza, so it may be Liza. But she did the interview with me weeks ago, and then she sent me a message. I need photos, and I need who took them, and then she had other couple questions for me to answer. So I opened that up, and I thought, well, this is going to take me 20, 30 minutes to go on Facebook, search for 3 photos. So I put it off. And then she sent me another message, and she told me, we're going to publish this the 1st of August. So then apparently she reached out to a couple of friends, because she reached out to you. Tommy said someone reached out to him as well. So she's like, if I can't get anywhere with Ed, I'll find his friends and say, can you please give me a photo of Ed?
She's already figured out you.
Yeah.
With just one interview.
Yeah, just go past Ed and go to his friends.
I started at Insta with our videos and the podcast kind of thing. What we're doing here, we have the Running Jester Patreon, but I also started an Instagram, the Running Jester, and I'm just kind of, when I'm going through these old files, when I see an old picture, and so the picture I gave her, well, actually the picture she wanted was a picture I took of you at Long Beach in 2011. You happened to run by me, and I have a back shot of you. Yeah.
Oh, of the Long Beach Marathon?
Long Beach Marathon.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Huh.
So you ran past me way back then. So that was 9 years ago.
I wasn't even the Jester then, was I?
No.
Or I just started being the Jester, but I wasn't dressed as a Jester when you saw me? Or was I? Yeah, I think I was, because I did Badwater in July of 2011, and I did have at least a Jester hat on. So
I got the picture here. Yeah. You have the hat on with the sign, and then you got that funky blue black square shirt and some surfer shorts. You got your leggings.
Oh, the black and blue shirt. That was when my shoe sponsor was Skechers. That was a Skechers shirt.
Yeah. Well, I did that marathon, and you ran by me, and I snapped a photo of you running. And it was kind of funny that was the photo. It's like, yeah, we want to use that photo, probably because it's old, So, and I guess the article, you might as well have you tell me, what's the article about?
It's I'm trying to remember now, because it was like weeks ago. I feel like an eternity ago, but it's about older people still wanting to be competitive in racing and racing ultras.
And that will segue nicely into what went on this weekend.
Well, before I forget, I was sitting, and I'll explain why I was sitting, because you know me, if I'm in a race, I'm not sitting.
Yeah.
I don't use this kind of language, but I came up with this term because it's so fitting. Sitting is for shitting in ultras, pretty much. That's the only time you should be sitting down in my mind. But anyway, so I'm sitting, and this guy shows up for the 12-hour race, and he's 4.5 hours late. Gets there at 12:30. He's like, "Oh, Ed, I just listened to your podcast on the way here." I'm like, wow, the one that we were talking about, that race, he had just listened to that, and we're in Tennessee, or no, we're in Kentucky. And I'm like, wow, this is great, because the podcast is getting around. People are starting to listen to it. So, all right. So what happened this weekend? This weekend, I went to Kentucky, my first time in Kentucky, and it was a 24-hour race. And it was a 2-mile loop. Now, I should have done some homework on this, because to me, a 24-hour race, you're trying to get as many miles as you can in 24 hours. So I automatically think the race directors think like I do. You want a fast, flat loop. So
we have this discussion all the time. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Well, the race I did last weekend was a 3 1/8 mile loop. It was not a flat loop. It was there was like 9,000 feet.
Yeah, we had a video. You did a little video, and we could definitely see it was treacherous.
Yeah,
with
up
mud
and down,
roots
and trip hazards. And so then here's a 2-mile loop. Well, we got out there, and they, because of rains, they switched it to 2.2, which was an odd distance because then I'm thinking, once I got started, I'm thinking, okay, 2.2 miles. When I get to where I'm at 100, it's going to be 99 miles. I'll have to go another loop and have 101.2 just to get 100 miles. But then I found out they decided to do like a 1 mile out. Yeah, so that was good. But because they couldn't get to where their regular loop was, they added this extra 0.1. It was up and down this hill. It's like, great, there's another hill. But the whole thing was rolling hills, as they said, on grass and then some single track. And it's not a fast course. And
No.
I don't blame them because they took over this race this year for the first time, and it had been going on for a while. And so they took over an existing event. But to me, it seems like if you're going to put on a 24-hour event and you're going to get some people that might want to do 100 miles, if it's not feasible because it's not flat, then do what many of the 24-hour races do. They'll actually have 24/100.
Yes.
And they'll allow you to, like Nantigo used to be 28 hours. Now they go up to 30, but usually 30 hours.
Yeah.
And they'll sometimes have a cutoff. If you're at mile 84 or beyond, then you can continue on, or like if it's a 30-hour cutoff. If you're at mile 80 or beyond, you can continue on to get your 100 miles in the 30 hours. And if that had been the case, it would have been different. So I get out there, I'm doing the loop, and I'm seeing, okay, this is not a fast loop, but all right, I'll make it work. And I'm banking some time because I'm fresh. So I'm doing 10 and a half, 11-minute miles at first and banking time, and then start slowing down. And then there's this one segment, couple segments where it's slick and you slip inside a bit. And there was rain predicted for basically the whole race, but every so often a little bit of a sprinkle, and then it'd go away. But that little bit of a sprinkle was just enough to make these little mud spots really slippery. So now I'm into the race about 8 hours in, just continuing to move as well as I can. And I start doing my math, and I'm like, okay, for me to make this happen, even with my bank time, I really need to be going at a 13-minute pace because I got to come in, get aid, go to the bathroom, do whatever else I'm going to need to do.
Yeah.
So even though a 15-minute per mile pace is what I needed to maintain, but to maintain that, I needed to run at maybe a 13 and a half, 14-minute pace. And it didn't make a whole lot of sense. And then I started noticing some things, like there has some not too steep of downhills, but a little bit of downhills. I started feeling a little bit of quad soreness, but then a little bit of a strain on my left quad. It's like, oh, that's not good. And so there's that. And then I knew the rains were going to come in, and that those mountain were going to get super slick. And easily, when that happens, you can go from a 14-minute per mile to a 20+ minute per mile, just slipping and sliding.
Oh yeah.
On the mud. And then I noticed something else, and why this didn't dawn on me initially, I don't know, but so my kidney was sore. It's like, man, I don't have kidney issues. I mean, all the times I've done backwater, all the races I've done heat. I know there's some runners who they'll have blood in their pee. I've never had that happen. I never had any issues with my kidneys.
I never have either.
Plenty well. But it's like, why is my kidney hurting here a little bit? And then I started putting 2 and 2 together. I hadn't slept. Okay, so the 2 nights before, I drove from home to Las Vegas because I looked for the cheapest flight. Even though it's a 4-hour drive from home to Vegas, the flight was really cheap to go from there over to Cincinnati. So then I ended up driving, kind of, stopping here and there at rest stops to sleep, but not getting good sleep Thursday night. And then my flight was supposed to come into Cincinnati at midnight Friday night. Well, I get this email from the airline, and it wasn't asking me. It said, your flight has been rescheduled. You will arrive in Cincinnati at 5:06 a.m. It wasn't, hey, we'd like to do this. Are you okay with this? Or, hey, we're going to do this, and we're going to give you a $50 voucher for your next flight. Yeah. It's like, accept this or lose your flight. It was no. And
no, that's how they always are. Yeah, they got you over a barrel.
And going from Denver, our flight was now scheduled to leave at midnight, going to Cincinnati, losing 2 hours, and then a 2.5-hour flight. So it's like, all right, I can at least sleep on the plane, get a little bit of sleep, because I didn't get much sleep the night before. I need to get some sleep. And then I'm sitting next to this woman who has a 2-month-old baby. It's not what you're thinking. The baby was perfectly quiet the whole time. But I have a 2.5, her baby was 2.5 months old, but I have a new 2-month-old granddaughter. So it struck up a little conversation. That was that. She was a talker. I was a talker.
Yeah.
We were like talking almost the whole time. There goes my sleep time.
Oh yeah.
And finally, I told her what I was going there for. I said, I got to get a little bit of sleep. So I got some sleep and then got to the airport and then needed to get, I decided to go with a Lyft instead of getting a rental car. It was just cheaper because I knew I could get a ride back after the race. And so I figured I can sleep in the car.
Yeah.
So I did. I got about an hour sleep. Anyway, so 2 nights in a row, I'm not getting much sleep. And as you know, I had severe adrenal fatigue, and for about 6 months, I took off from running. And guess where the adrenal gland is?
Yeah.
It's right on top of the kidney. And and then I had some stress that was going on back home, and lots of stuff going on. It's like, I'm taxing my body. I'm going right back to the pattern that I'd done that got me in this in the first place. So I added all that up. Long story short, or long story long, I decided, you know what, I'm going to call it 12 hours. I'm not going to go, and the rain's going to come, and with very little sleep, I'm going to get so tired and beat myself up, and I don't want to get to 98 miles and not make 100. What's the point of that? So that was my decision, and so I stopped at 12 hours. I'm fresh. My legs are fresh. I'm coming into my next race. I know I'm going to be fully recovered. I'll get good sleep. Yeah. So I finally started doing some things like using logic instead of beating my body into the ground, week after week after week. I can't do that anymore if I want to sustain being able to perform well. And I've got a couple of races in a row. The good news, the race next week is a 30-hour race. Yeah. So I've got plenty of time. Plus, it's a 1 mile flat paved loop. That's my race. Yeah. Other than that, it's in Georgia. It's going to be hot and humid, but still, I've got 30 hours. And then the weekend after that is in Oregon, and that's also a 1 mile flat paved loop now in Oregon with good weather. So I've got 2 good races coming up that I should be able to perform well going into those without being all beat up.
Yeah, and that goes to, it's kind of like funny that you kind of did what I was going to ask anyways, but you just spilled the beans without me having to drag them out of it, which is good. You kind of like, he's just, and I often with the athletes I coach, I'm like, I want to make it to the point where you don't even really need me more than just occasional guidance, that you kind of learn your body and learn the signs and quit ignoring those signs and issues. And so, like you're talking about the pacing and stuff, to do 100 miles in 24 hours, you have to do 14:24 pace, 4.2 miles an hour. And it's funny, I was talking to Blanc about this morning when we were walking. I was like, civilians think they can walk 4 miles an hour. And no, they can't. They can walk 4 miles an hour for maybe 30 minutes. But even in an hour, 4.2 miles an hour is fast. Blanc has been walking for 3 years now straight. And we go out and we're doing 3.3, 3.4 miles an hour. And if anybody saw us, they'd be like, those two are moving pretty quickly. And so your margin of error in a 100-mile race, in a 24-hour race to get 100 miles is very, very slim. You don't know as well because you used to be able to crank them in 20 hours. And so when you told me, that you stopped at 50, I was like, well, that's good because you're not going to probably get the 100 or you're going to have to bury yourself. And then I started thinking about your quest of, possibly trying to take the 100-mile record, that I kind of looked and counted Walter's just straight hundreds, not counting timed events. And I counted like 40 of them. Now, not of all those races might be on Ultra Sign Up. And so I was almost wondering, is it possible that maybe you want to go for a strictly 100-mile record race? No timed events in any of it. Just going around the country and doing, and the reason, I know you're going, then I can't get the number, but the thing is, then it would be a pure kind of thing. And I think Liz Bauer, when she did it, she went straight through and just did straight hundreds.
I know that some people look at that and in fact, it's funny, when I finished, people might have thought it, but only one person sent me an email. When I finished the 41, I got an email from someone that said, you didn't do 41 100-mile races. You did 41 races that were 100 miles or longer. Yeah. To me, that means, well, that's even I would think that's even more impressive. But the point that he was making was that when you're doing a 24-hour race, that's not a 100-mile race. But here's the thing that to me is interesting. There are races like we talked about, they'll have a 2,400-mile option, 24-hour 100-mile option. If you're doing the 24-hour race, you got to get your 100 miles in 24 hours, or you're, for me, but yet the same event, the same loop course, if you're signing for the 100, they'll give you 30 hours. So it's like, but the person who sent me the email was the person whose male record I had broke. So, and he was like a purist of, he didn't come out right out and say it, because I broke his, at the time, Scott Brockmeyer, his girlfriend was Liz Bauer. Because of what happened that year, they ended up splitting up. But so his point was, you didn't break Liz Bauer's record truthfully, Ed, because all hers were pure hundreds. I'm like, wait a minute. I did 6 of her events with her, like Nanny Go. We did the exact same 1-mile loop. I did mine in under 24 hours. She did 100 miles. She had up to 28 hours of the time to do it. But yet, because in your mind, well, yeah, but she signed up for the 100-mile race. So I see what you're saying, but here is a problem that I see. Many of the 100-mile races, and Walter's a much better trail runner than I am, they're trail hundreds. Those beat me up because of all the elevation up and down. And a 24-hour race, a flat 24-hour race, I could do really well at those and maybe finish 100 in 22 hours and then still stick around and do an extra 5 or 10 miles. Plus, it gives me the option of this. I can go to, like I'm going to do at Wyatt's race.
We talked about that.
I can sign up for the 72-hour and get over 100 miles done in that, and then also do his 100-mile race, so I can get 2 events at one location.
Yeah.
I don't. You know what? To me, if the purists look at what I'm going to do and they say, "Oh, that doesn't really count because yours weren't all exact 100-mile races," it's like, okay, then don't count it in your mind. Because when I did my 41. I actually ended up with over 4,800 miles, but it was 41 events because Badwater is 135 miles.
I'm not bringing it up more. I'm not really bringing it up as a purist type of thing. I'm bringing it up more practical, kind of tying into like you talked with I Run Far about older athletes competing and doing things, and that doing this would still be, I know you want to get a certain number in the year, but doing this would make your opportunities to finish the hundreds more possible, because you're not going to run into the issues you ran into like this weekend where you go to a race and the course is difficult, the conditions are difficult. But like if they went to this race and it was a 100-miler and they gave you 30 hours, which is usually the standard 28, 38 hours, you're going to get those finishes every single time. Like I said, it's just an idea that I had, like that, we talked about this in the last podcast, what's going to happen, now that back in the day, you could crank out 110, 115 miles in a 24 without too many issues. So you had a big cushion. Now you have a lot less cushion. And, it's just, as you get older, but also if you're trying to do even more of them and then the travel and all that stuff. So like I said, it was just an interesting, I don't know if you could even rack up enough straight. I mean, not even, it's just like when you go to Nanny Go, you don't sign up for the 24, you sign up for the 100 only. Or you go to Nanny Goat events.
So you're saying, okay, so you're saying instead of what my pattern has been in the past, where I would sign up for the 24, instead of doing that, sign up for the 100, so I give myself enough cushion.
Well, not only do you give yourself enough cushion, but then also it just you look at your accomplishment. You're trying to do the most hundreds in a year. Do hundreds. Don't do 24s that show you did 110. I'm just saying, like I said, we do this podcast more of like as a, like I said, like
work out some ideas.
Yeah, but also like, Kroll and Drogan say, don't leave the podcast out in the hallway, and have this discussion. And, obviously there's some stuff we won't bring up, but this kind of thing is more, and I think people, it's kind of an interesting what you're talking about. I mean, I'm not saying I'm going to pin you to this right now.
Here's what I'm thinking I'm going to do. I'm open. There's a time, and it wasn't that long ago, to where I get an idea in my head. It's like, this is what I'm going to do. I just be stubborn and say, I'm doing this, and if people don't like it, too bad. But you know what? I think what I'm going to do, because you brought it up, I'll open it up to discussion for people who watch this podcast and say, hey, what do you think about this in your mind? Because if I do that, it also limits my opportunities. Like, for example, the weekend, next weekend and the weekend after, those 2 races I wouldn't be able to do because they don't have a distance option. It's a fixed time event, and I don't want to limit myself. I'll give it some thought.
Well,
And
no,
I know
but these
also my
aren't.
strong
But
point,
these races are just where you're working out the
just
kinks
testing it
and
out.
figuring out what you're gonna do. And so I'm not, obviously you've got these and you're signed up and you're gonna head to them. And like the good thing is next week is a 30-hour, and then the following one you've been there, and so it shouldn't be an issue. But just saying, because if you may just like, I'm 57, you're going to be 58 soon. And it like the conditions start. In fact, when I first started getting in, I mean, I've been running since 79 and I've always been a big guy. And then I'm like, when I got into ultras back in 2010, 2011, because of my size and because I was mainly a walker, I was missing cutoffs all the time. But what it was I kind of had a natural affinity for athletes that were older, guys in their 70s, older than we are, but because especially in trail racing, we've talked about this before, you lose that little flexibility and step and you start falling down and things like that. And so, but then I do loop races and you're out there and you're watching these guys like the 80-year-old who just crushed the world record, did 145 miles in 48 hours, which is like 7 miles farther than I can do it. So I have kind of like a bond or a brotherhood with my older athletes because, you give them a fair course, a paved loop, they'll be out there rocking it night and day, but you put them on, Angel's Crest course or, or what you did today and, it's curtains. And so it's just one of those things. I was just kind of curious that, I kind of know your idea on it, but if you're going to do this quest, and the thing is like,
I'll think about.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, like Walter, when he did his,
I was going to say all ideas, all entered.
Yeah. But what I was going to say is like one of the things that you do with these FKTs, which I don't think you really did when you went out in your first one, is kind of FKTs or even records. You need to like post your rules of what you're going to do when you set out, and it can be anything, but then just everybody knows, like, cause I know Walter kind of had like, not a manifesto, but he kind of said, this is what I'm going to do to go break the record. And I think that's something you should definitely do, lay out and say, these are the rules. I mean, and not saying that, you're honorable in doing what you're doing, but just be completely transparent, kind of like we do on this podcast, being, just saying, okay, I'm going after this record and I'm going to do these timed events and here's the rules that I'm going to follow. And it doesn't, if people don't agree with the rules, at least you have guidelines, and I think that's important because like with the FKTs, the fastest known times, people are doing that now. There's like that website and it says, you should have a Garmin InReach, you should do this, this, and this, just to make it, and like, or people who do the Badwater 146, they have a page and here's what you need to do. And so I'm saying just kind of something in the future. So anyway, but I'm glad you stopped at, the 12-hour, got the 50 in, that'll put you better. For the coming race, I pulled it up here that you're going to be going to the Southern Discomfort race.
Yeah, so Discomfort, and they have the 30-hour and the 24, and I signed up for the 30-hour. And my goal, you'll probably think I'm nuts for doing this, but because I did not get my Badwater in, and my goal of Badwater was to try and do a sub 30, which I think I was in shape to do that. So my goal in the 30 hours is to do 135. Yeah, that's my that way I get in my mind say, I've done my Badwater goal, which obviously it's not Badwater, but 135 in 30 hours. And this is going to be something to shoot for. I need that. Like a 24-hour race, I'm shooting for 100. But shooting for 100 miles in 30 hours, it's going to make me lazy. I'm just going to, I wouldn't say phone it in, but I can, walk 18-minute miles and do that. And so I need a little bit of a challenge for myself. So I'm setting it at 135. But we'll see. I might adjust it. It's like Mike Tyson would always say, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Well, yeah, I've got a plan for 135. I might get out there. I might be so blistering hot and humid. I decide, you know what? I'm happy just to get 100 after all. Yeah, and just like this weekend, I was rethinking, in my mind, I have this grandiose idea of 60 hundreds in a year, because it went from Monica Scholl's 28 to Liz's 35 to my 41 to Walter's 50. Well, natural progression seems like, let's go up to 60, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60. But I'm thinking, you know what? 52 would break the record, and that's one a week. So I've kind of readjusted a little bit. Yep. So I have like a tiered, like 52 would be my minimum I want to get. Otherwise, what's the point, But I don't want to just break it by one or two. So whatever age I am at the time, whether I'm still 58 or 59 or even 60, that would make sense. All right, try to do my age. So 60 is kind of the far-reaching goal, but I'm thinking about maybe that 52 might be a little more feasible, at least as a start point.
Well, I just did the quick math on 135 and 30 hours. You know what pace you got to do?
I don't even know. I haven't figured it out yet. Tell me.
13:20.
Oh, but it's a flat. Okay, well, maybe I'll rethink that. Maybe I'll go 125. Let's say 125 then. I didn't know it was that fast.
Yeah, it's 13:20 pace. You know, so that's you know, and
that's pushing it a bit. And then I've got a race right the next weekend. I don't want to. If it was a single race, that's all I was going for, maybe. But yeah, and you know, that's also made me rethink. I used to have this attitude. I never understood why these elite runners would go enter a race and if they're having a bad race, they'd like a 100-mile race, they'd pull out of it. I'm thinking, well, you signed up for 100 miles, so you have a bad race. What the rest of us do, we just stick it out. But then I started to think about it, and I thought, well, if they have a sponsor and they're trying to get, you know, podium finishes because their sponsors look at that. And it used to be Ultra Sign Up, they didn't list DNS, so you could have an Ultra Sign Up listing that looked like every race you've done, you've finished really well. But then they started adding the DNF listing, which I think is the right thing to do. If you pull out, at least there's a record that, hey, you were there and did finish it. But now I'm thinking, all right, if these guys are training really hard because they do want to get sponsorship and they're having a bad race, why should they have to stick it out and beat themselves up to finish 100 miles just to be able to satisfy guys like me that are saying, hey, why'd you drop out? That's, you know, so I'm thinking that with myself, like I'm sitting here at the sidelines at 12 hours and I had 51.6 miles, which was, I had, you know, just probably, I don't know what my position was in the 12 hours, but I think I was maybe second or third or something.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people who had a lot less miles than me. They're doing the 24 and they're probably going, well, why would you drop out? You've got so many miles. You're going to beat everybody else in the 24 hour, which the winner actually did 101, which is, you can talk about that. But second place, the first male, it was a female, first place male was 86 miles. Well, I already done 51, but it wasn't, I would rather have gotten last place 100 at that race than first place in the 24 hour and be a couple miles shy because of what it would do to me. So my point is I've rethought why people will drop out of a race. And the other factor too is if it's not fun, I get that now. If people are like, I'm just not having any fun, why burn yourself out?
No, why torture yourself? Well, you know, well, it's because you kind of, there used to be the old school kind of philosophy in ultras that, and kind of the idea of ultras was to go out and cover the distance. You know, you showed up, you're supposed to do the 50 mile, the 100 mile. And that was kind of the goal was just finishing the course no matter what. But you'll see, especially, you know, obviously with the elite athletes, you really, and I say this all the time, and you'll see the elite athletes like, you know, Mev Keflezighi, who we were talking about. I love in his book, and I used to save this photo. He posted on Instagram one time this adorable picture he took from his book, and it listed his marathons and how he did in all the marathons. And then he penciled in silver medal at the one Olympics. And then so Mev Keflezighi had a 16-year marathon career. Guess how many marathons Mev Keflezighi ran in 14 years?
Well, I believe his final retirement race was New York City. I think that was his 26th marathon, if I remember correctly.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, exactly. Okay. And I've got one of my biggest craziness with a lot of people, and I mean, obviously you're the master of doing tons and tons of races, but most people shouldn't be doing that. And so like most elite guys run a fast one in the spring and one in the fall, and that's it. So the best guy, one of the best American marathoners ever, has plenty of sponsors. He's running 2 races a week. And the thing is, and we've talked about this.
2 races a year.
Yeah, twice a year.
Twice
And
a
also,
year.
yeah.
Yeah.
And also the thing is, we were talking about this, is that no one, and especially sponsors or the public, really notices or cares if you drop out of a race. They just don't. All they care about, in fact, you need to watch it. Actually, it was pretty difficult to watch. HBO has a documentary with Michael Phelps, and he's kind of doing the narration, but it's about Olympic athletes and depression and what they go through, and talking
I'd
about,
love to see that.
and it's rough, actually. It's pretty rough to watch. I watched it last night, and like Michael Phelps, you know, he was suicidal, he got DUIs. A bunch of the others are athletes, because what happens is they train for 4 years, and then they have that moment, and even when, like Michael's, like all the medals he won, you just end up feeling really hollow. But then the problem is, like they're saying, like Apollo Ono was saying, like, yeah, here's the difference between first and fourth in the speed skating race.
Yeah.
That's first and fourth. He goes, first might get some money. Second, nobody cares about. Third, they really don't care about. And fourth, that doesn't matter at all. Except, and it doesn't exist. And so when you're in a race and you're not feeling it, dropping out is the thing to do. And in fact, it was funny when I was interviewing Craig Simmons, and, you know, he's had some classic Sufferfest, and he mentioned, yeah, Andy, you're really good at, like, just going, I'm done, and leaving, you know. And like I said, I went to the Dome and didn't even get to 100K. I was like, okay, you know, live for another day. This is just not happening. And, you know, and I had a great quote one time when I was at, I think it was when they had the rocks at across the years that one year, and I just got terrible blisters. And, you know, I talked to a good friend.
And, the gravel, the pea gravel.
Yeah, the pea gravel. And I talked to a friend who just said, you know, if you're not having any fun and your goals aren't going to be able to reach your goals, or they don't mean that much to you, why torture yourself? Just for the sake of self-flagellation, and also, and it goes into what we were talking about on the last podcast about worrying about what other people think. It's like, so what? I mean,
yeah. I learned that lesson. You know Eric Clifton, who Eric Clifton is?
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, these are people listening to him. If some of the people are newer to ultra running scene, they may not know the name, but back in the day, Eric was, he was the cast pajamas. I mean, that guy, he held the course record at JFK for 17 years, I believe it was. And it was actually the 50-mile American road record. And he also, for close to that, like 16 years, held a 100-mile, I think, trail record. But he was notorious, kind of like Steve Prefontaine. Eric Clifton was notorious for going out super hard and strong, and then if the wheels fell off, boom, he was out. And so I had done my first Badwater, 2011. I had done that, and then 5 days later there was a 100-mile race, Cool Moon 100 up in Northern California, and I decided I wanted to do that one because the Badwater was my 135th marathon or longer distance for a 1 year, and that was a new world record for the marathons, most marathons in a year. So I wanted to do this 100-mile race. So I went to that race, and I met Eric, and my friend John Moak had done Badwater and DNF. And so I was talking to Eric, and I said, man, I don't really know what to say to John because I finished Badwater, had actually a good race, and I feel really bad for him, but I'm not quite sure how to handle it because I know he feels terrible about his DNF. And Eric started talking to me. He said, you know how many DNFs I have? I said, I don't know. He said, I don't either. I said, I have so many of them I can't even count them.
Yeah.
He said, and this is typical Eric, he said, DNF is no, he had something with DNF, but basically no fucking big deal. That was his language. Yeah. And
does not fucking matter.
I would go out, yeah, pretty much.
Does not matter.
Said, I would go out super strong, and if it wasn't happening, I'd pull out. I don't care what people thought because my records spoke for themselves. When I had a really good race, I had a tremendous race. Mm-hmm. And that's how he was. He was balls to walls at every race he did. And that was his style. And hearing that from him, you know, made me know, okay. And at that point, I had not had a DNF in 100-mile races. I'd gone like over 20 100-mile races, no DNFs. Yeah. And I always had the old school attitude that some people have, that death before DNF. That's a great, like, again, Mike Tyson, you got to
Yeah.
Everybody has plans, they can punch them out. That's a great attitude to have until you have a DNF. And then you have a wake-up call from the ultra god saying, oh, really? You think you're all that? Here, take this. Now you're like every other normal 100-mile runner who's eventually going to have a DNF if they just run enough of them,
Yeah.
you know, and you challenge yourself enough. You could do just easy stuff if your goal is, oh, I never want a DNF. But then you're not pushing yourself. And you know when you have a DNF, you know, and if you truly, you didn't just pull out because you just gave up. But if you know, okay, I found my limit. I kept, you know, pushing and doing harder and harder stuff. And I've had this conversation with Josh Holmes as well, that he's never had a DNF in all his hundreds, and he's probably done like 40 hundreds. But his goal race, a race that he really, really wants to do, is Barkley, because he was born and grew up in Tennessee, and he's really good friends with Laz, and he's done Ball State like 6 or 7 times. He does all Laz's races. But he said, I will not do Barkley until I have a DNF, because he said the likelihood is I'm going to DNF at Barkley. I don't want that to be my first DNF. But, you know, so different people have different attitudes with the DNF. But I've certainly changed my attitude from at one point it being, you know, death before DNF. Yeah. And then it being, well, okay, if you have the DNF, but at least stick it out there, even if you don't have the time you want, to where, you know what, it's everybody's own event. Is there whatever makes people happy?
Well, like I talked about in other podcast about, so many people just jump in the ultra world and never did the 5K, 10Ks, the little baby experiments to learn lessons and all this kind of thing. And so the other problem is, if you go into these, I mean, you need to go in that you're going to tough it out, you know, or you'll never finish one. But the problem is sometimes if it's just not working and the weather conditions are terrible, you know, you're working on a big experiment that can really blow up in your face. And it's not just going to blow up on that day. The ramifications from that day are going to impact you months and months in time in the future. Because if you just go out there and suffer fest for another, I mean, a perfect example is the gravel year. You know, I ended up bailing on it, recovered, went and did a 50K. That Dio guy, he has a 50K at Griffith Park. I got DNF in March. I got a DNF in this trail run thing, got this big old trophy, which was kind of funny. I did last. And then a month later, I went to Blue, and I actually had to beat a couple decent guys, Dennis Williams and the Jackson kid, and I won, and Susan, who was on my butt the entire time, and I won the 48. But I would have never won that 48 in April if I had been manned up and gutted out that 6-day. I just, you know, that actually wasn't the peak gravel. It was the year I left after 4 days because the conditions and everything were miserable.
Was it the rainy year? Was that what it rained during the middle there?
It was a lot.
They all blend together for a while. For me.
It was super cold, and Jamil was only there. There was no one else there. It was the year that the family wasn't there. There's a lot of issues. And after 4 days, I just was like, I'm done. But if I had stayed and gutted out, then probably could have gotten another 300. I may not have had all those other successes in the future. And so that's, you know, it's this kind of a philosophy. And I really kind of bring it up because I want people to understand that. And I often talk to you about, like, people don't realize and understand how difficult this stuff is. A really funny thing about Eric Clifton, I heard this story, I think it was on some podcast, Michael Morton, who's like the only East Coast guy to win Western States. He was super fast back in the 80s, 90s. You heard of him? Remember him?
Michael Morton?
Michael Morton.
Yeah.
Morton.
Oh, who retired and came back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do remember Michael Morton. Yeah.
Well, when he was first starting out, Clifton was the beast. And so they were at probably JFK or something. And Morton's coach or whoever he hung out with said, you know, no matter what you do in this race, just find Eric and just stick with Eric no matter what. So Eric does his usual blast off the starting line, and they're running for a while, a short amount of time, maybe half an hour, 45 minutes. And then all of a sudden Eric goes off the course, and it's because he had to take care of business. Well, Morton listened. Mike follows him? No. Mike stood there waiting for him to get out of the bushes while he was he was sitting in. And so it's like, but I love that an athlete actually completely is like, okay, I'm going to do exactly what my coach handler said, no matter what, stick with Eric. And so Eric, but I guess that was one of the tactics Eric did. I think I remember talking to him about it, or he said something that he often went out hard because he knew that the system would hit him and then he could drop drawer and go. and then keep
Yeah.
on running. So a very funny thing. And then one of the other things, like we used to do the endurance challenge running from, Corona to Santa Monica Pier, that urban 100, which was my first 100. And the last time I ran it, I was just having a terrible race. It was all sideways. And I actually went over a little 30 hours. And with like 7 or 8 miles to go, that lady, this friend of mine, Maureen, caught me, who used to do Angel's Crest. She used to be a pretty tough runner back in the 90s, one of the few females. And she catches me with one of her friends, and we're just having a misery fest. And she's like, oh, we're going to be over 30 hours. And the guy she was with, who was an old school runner, he goes, really, nobody cares what your time is. They sort of maybe care that you finish, but they don't really care about that a whole lot. So, don't worry about what your time is. They're going to be like, oh, you ran and you finished, or you went and things went sideways. Okay. Because, the one thing in our world today is like, no one wants to fail. If this whole culture where participation ribbons and there's no losers and all that stuff, it's kind of why I left coaching kids. Because the kids were okay, but the parents were the worst. And it's like, winning and losing, you learn lessons. You got to do that. You can't always just be, I'm a winner. And so.
Well, and that brings up a point. I had made a commitment to you that I would do a race report after this race, and I did it on our podcast. So I knew you'd hold me accountable to it. And I thought, oh, great. The first race report I'm going to do is going to be where I failed, which it's not fail if you learn from it. But then I was talking to my buddy, Tommy Lanetta, and he was saying, yeah, but, if you teach us something that you learned, that could be more valuable. Then you had a great race. Everything went well. Yeah. Okay, well, great. How do we relate to that? How's that? You're going to teach us anything? But telling us the things that you learned and how you came to your decision and why it was the right decision, even though you didn't accomplish the goal you set out to do. Yeah. That could be something that people can relate to and can be helpful. It's like, you know what, you're right. So my first race report will be, not a failure, but I didn't accomplish the goal I set out to do, which means that's why next weekend I got to, do the right things and be smart and play it safe and not go for my 135 miles, instead go for maybe 120.
Yeah, that turns out to be like a 22-hour 100 too pace.
That's pushing it a bit, which I should be capable of doing it, but whether I want to push myself that hard when I've got other races coming up, maybe that's not so smart.
Yeah. But there's a meme or the meme about, you don't really win. You don't learn from success. You learn from failure. And it's, you gotta, what did I do wrong? And, and I used to ask my athletes, I stole it from Ann Trace, and I can't remember the 3 questions, but it's kind of like, what are 3 things you did right? What are 3 things you did wrong? And what are 3 things you're going to fix, or, something like that. That was kind of, until you get to kind of deep analysis. But yeah, I would definitely like you to, write up something. I actually, speaking of that, I just briefly went and I threw it up on our that little page that I want you to start writing down things instead of on a notepad. And it was interesting. I didn't post this yet, but I did post, you wrote an old thing about Badwater, which is really good. I threw it up on the Patreon about, you're talking about like 2013, what is to expect at Badwater, with the crew.
Oh, why you should never, ever crew for someone at Badwater? That one? I think that was the I wrote up this thing. Yeah. Was that
it's
maybe not. It was something different than that. Because I did that once, and it got picked up at a couple different places, and people referred to it. It was tongue in cheek, but
it was written in 2012. And says, "Does seeing all cool pictures and reading all the great posts give you a?" Yeah, one. Okay, I put it up on Patreon because I figured it was pretty. But then it was interesting. I found this one where it's. I don't know if you remember writing this one. It's on. 2015 during our 0 to Hero days in 200 days, and your insight, your discussion on virtual races and your opinion.
I didn't like 20,
yes.
I hated them. Virtual races stink. Don't ever do those. And now I'm putting one on. How things change, huh?
Well, but you never could imagine that, like, we would have this, COVID and all this insanity.
But I even mine, I still can't call it a virtual race. I call it a virtual run because I still have the attitude to where a race is like the race that I just did.
Yep.
We all showed up. We dealt with the same conditions,
Yeah.
the muddy course.
No, I mean, I'm looking, I have it on my screen right now, and what you're saying is what you wrote. You have it here, I call, it shouldn't have the word race attached. It's not a race, virtual, or any other kind. Call it a virtual run instead. Calling it a race sets a bad precedent for real races that may be in someone's future.
Yeah, I was pretty opinionated. I've softened up. And you know what?
I haven't posted it, but it's a teaser for people. Maybe a teaser. I'll post this, and if you become a patron, you can read this old thoughts. But I put
how Ed flip flopped. Yeah.
No, you're still consistent on here, but I made, like I told you, I made it's called Just Words Google Doc that we're going to start sharing, and hopefully, like this, the race report you're going to do, you should write it on this page of the Google Doc.
There's something that I still feel pretty strong about. I softened a little bit, but that's my opinion on buckles.
Yes,
there are races that sometimes will give a buckle for a 100K or a 50 mile. And I used to be really adamant against it. I've softened a little. I will never give a buckle anything that if I put on a race, you'll have to do 100 miles to get a buckle. That's just the way it's going to be for me. But I understand sometimes that they might want to give it, I don't know, I call it a teaser buckle, but maybe to get someone to feel what it's like to get a buckle and go, okay, now I really want to do 100, get a 100-mile buckle. But I also feel strong about this, that in a virtual race, that's not a buckle-worthy event. And I just got one from the great virtual race across Tennessee, because I did the 1,000K. They sent me a buckle. Well, I'm going to put it on my big ring of buckles because I have some races I did that didn't have a buckle. So I'm still, trying to fill up 185 buckles. I don't have 185 buckles for 185 hundreds. But I still feel like, I don't know, buckles are kind of a special deal in my book. And you get it by going to an actual event and having a cutoff time, and you're all on equal footing. Just like the race that I did this weekend, they didn't have a buckle for it, which is okay. I didn't earn one anyway, but it seems like if there's parameters, you need to meet those parameters. Now, that's not to say, for example, there's a 30-hour cutoff for a 100-mile race, and at the race director's discretion, someone comes in at 30:05 minutes, and they still get the buckle. I'm cool with that because that should be race director's discretion. But you have a race like Western States, they can't do that. They have to have an exact, and I agree with that because it's a very specific event. It's very high profile, and professional ultra runners basically are running it. And there should be that strict cutoff. Even Badwater has a strict 48. There are some races that are really, really strict to the cutoff time. But I'm okay with the race director and like, for example, you mentioned Endurance Challenge 100. The previous race director was super strict on his 30-hour cutoff. And there was only 20, 30, 40 people doing the race. And I remember my buddy, Steve Hernandez, he was out there on the course. And this race director, at 30 hours, he just packed up and left. And it's like, you still have, and it was a self-supported race. You had to have a crew, but still, shouldn't you stick around? I mean, I always stay till the last runner comes in anyway, but shouldn't you stay, make sure that your guy out there on the course is okay, even if you're not going to recognize him and give him a buckle. So one of the things that happened when Alf and I took that race over in 2015, when he had dropped it, it's a whole big story there. But first thing I did, because I had a group I was training for that race, I raised the cutoff from 30 to 32 hours, and that opened up a whole lot of people who were able to experience, enjoy, and get a buckle. But again, they still had to be there, do the event, be there with everybody else on the same course, because that's what a buckle should be for. But who knows? Talk to me in 5 years from now, I might have totally softened my thinking on that. I don't know.
Well, we both, started running. You ran a few marathons and some running, and then you left. But, I started running races in 79. And I often tell people, I'm old school. Like when I used to go to local 5Ks and 10Ks, they'd have a trophy for first place. And that was it. Then they
Yeah.
grudgingly said, okay, we'll give one to the women. Jesus, now we have to have 2 trophies. You know, they're kicking and screaming and about having to do it. So then in order there'd be like first, second, third. And then they had first, second, third for the women. Then they had masters, 40 and over, 40 and under. Then they had 10-year age groups. Then they do 5-year age groups. And then races started, like marathons started handing out finisher medals. And then it became half marathon finisher medals. And now it's 5K finisher medals that are bigger than the Flavo Flav clocks. And
Yeah.
I'm just like, and so, you know, I come from where, yeah, and I back then won some races and I went home with a trophy, but all the other 300 people in the race just went home. And sometimes not even with a shirt, you just ran hard, and so I kind of, but I get it that people, you know, fixate on the
Well,
awards and the medals and the trophies, and you know, but it needs
and
that intrinsic. I think you got to get past that, you know, just picking up all the baubles and trinkets. But
times change too, and that
yeah,
you look at when you and I first started running marathons. Do you remember what the qualifying time was for Boston Marathon?
Oh, yeah.
I know it because it was burned in my brain.
Yeah.
What was the qualifying time for Boston?
When I ran it, it was 2:50.
2:50, exactly.
And
Same
now,
with me.
and it was 3:05 now, the same age group, 15 minutes slower.
And there wasn't different age categories. It was 2:50. Now women had whatever theirs was. They did have it actually another time, but it didn't matter. Whatever your age was, you went to go Boston, you did 2:50. The best I did was a 3:01:18. I think you did what, a 2:51, your PR marathon.
My sophomore year in college, after coming off a good cross country season, I ran the San Diego Marathon, and I followed the lead woman. Had at mile 20 an incident where I had to. Thankfully, I found a porta potty. Just came out of nowhere, and long story short, I ended up finishing. I ran 20:50 and some change, and actually, it's kind of cool. You finished at now, which is Qualcomm Stadium. You like ran around the stadium and finished on the home plate, and so I qualified for Boston because back then they would let you qualify as long as you went under two. If you went under 22:51, but that's also, you know, it's like to break 3 hours, you got to run 6:52. So to break 2:50 is like 6:40 pace. It's fast, you know. And now you only have to do, 3:05 is the fastest time.
Well, for my age, I think I don't even know because I haven't checked recently, but I think it's like 2:40. But I did go to Boston on a qualifier when it was for my age was 3:30 because they had changed the standards and it wasn't that strict 2:50 anymore. So, but you look at the finish times of marathons and you see that over the years they've gotten the mean or the average has gotten slower and slower and slower. I personally have no problem with that because it makes it open to people who otherwise, because when you and I did our first marathon, my first one was 1980, yours was right around that time too. You were shamed if you walked at all. It's like, what are you walking? Just run. You're supposed to run the whole time.
Yeah.
And now it's okay to walk the whole marathon or run like the Jeff Galway system, which is a great system. But you know how I hang out till the last marathoner comes in, and even in a race where it's a 6.5 hour cutoff, they're still coming in at 8 hours. You have a race like LA Marathon has an 8 hour cutoff. They're still coming in because there's 20,000 people. They're still coming in at 10 hours, 11 hours. But I don't have a problem with it because these are people who are on that outer fringe who would never think they're allowed to do a marathon, maybe because, maybe have weight or whatever issue. And now it's been opened up to where, come and be a part of it. So I actually like that aspect of it.
Back in the 80s, the cutoff for the marathon, they packed up
4 hours.
4 hours. Yeah. You ran, like I remember when I was running high school, there was a mom whose daughter ran on our team Betty Saba. In fact, she's almost 80 now and still comes out and walks some races. But I remember we used to hear how she was running like 5 hour marathons, and we just thought, oh my God, that's just unbelievable. She's so out slow. There for slow. But the one thing I do have is that, like with marathons and cutoffs, is I actually kind of changed my ideas with coaching and stuff, that I really think the half marathon distance should be as far as a lot of people go. Like if you can't really do a half in under 3 hours, doing a marathon, being out there for 6-7 hours, that's just way too much time. Yes, it's an accomplishment to cover the distance, but the damage and just the difficulty of doing a marathon for most people. I mean, like if you're truly just have issues, like it takes me 6 hours to do marathons now because I walk a lot and I'm a big guy, but I'm prepared for it. But you get a lot of people out there running marathons who are not prepared for it, and they're going out there and spending 6, 8, 9 hours. It's like, I think it's almost doing more harm than good for them, where they'd be much better accomplishment of doing the half marathon. And once they get fast enough, but then I also am coming from where you should get good at the shorter distances and move up, not start at a marathon and come down. I mean, a great story, but that's like my beef with like Western states, how, now if you get lottery tickets, you can't get in the race for years and years, but they still let people qualify for the race by doing 100K. And you guys,
Yeah.
a difference between 100, like you just ran 50 miles and it's like no big deal, but 60 miles is still not a big deal. You get that 75, 80, that's when things get real. And
Right.
and especially for the slower people. So, and I've argued with that AJ Wilkins all the time. It's like, well, we like it that there's somebody, and I'm like, yeah, but also what happens with that is you've got such a limited amount of people who can do the race that you get a lot of these bucket
They
list
dilute
people.
the pool.
Well, no, you get a lot of these bucket list people who they're going to go cherry pick 100K, get a lottery ticket, get in, run it, and then never do another ultra, never contribute to the, putting on races, crewing, pacing, volunteering, and it's just a one and done. I know a lot of people who've done that, and they may have had success at Western or not, but it's all, like I said, we just kind of rambling along here. So, let me just check off. I was talking about, just doing like whether you're going to try and do more just hundreds or the 24. I would like to
I'll think about it.
Hopefully write up a race report, and also how are the shoes?
The shoes were good. So if anybody doesn't know this, I was running in shoes that had holes in them. Literally, they had holes to the bottom of the shoe. And then last week's race, I actually was running with 2 left shoes because every left shoe I had a hole in it, or every right shoe I had a hole in it. So I took one of my left shoes and put it on my right foot. Yeah. And then at like mile 24, I popped against the rock and my big toe just boom, just like popped right out of that spot. Anyway, got through that race. That was last weekend, and got my sub 24-hour 100. Well, I had new Paradigm. Okay, I did something dumb. So I had Paradigms and Lone Peaks. Lone Peaks are a trail shoe. Paradigms are a road shoe. Yeah. Well, I didn't want to. I thought that I may not get them in time for this race, so I decided to just go with one pair that I would do a rush shipment on. Like an idiot, I chose it to be the Paradigms, which is a road running shoe, and that's what I got on Thursday. It came in. Well, this trail was slick, and the Paradigms, they have no traction, at least not trail traction. It's a road shoe. Yep. And it's like Lone Peaks. They're made for trail. I should have put a rush order on the Lone Peak. I would have been slipping and sliding. But anyway, but the cushion was really nice. The problem I had is I beat my feet up so bad the weekend before that they were really sore. Even in this cushion shoe, had already done the damage. That's another reason why I decided to stop at 12 hours, because my feet were just aching. I mean, it's one of those things to where, I don't think I ever finished let me come back to about the kidney thing. Anyway, my feet were already so beat up that even though they were in this really nice cushy shoe, I couldn't enjoy the benefits of it because I'd already done the damage the week before. But I think, getting another week and doing just like during the week, my mileage would be just maintenance miles. I'll go out and you just do a couple miles each day to keep my streak going. Power walk, do some running, but minimal. Give my feet a little bit of a break, and then hopefully that soreness will go away. So I think I mentioned about my adrenal fatigue and how my kidney was aching, and then I figured it out. Oh, it's my adrenal gland because I haven't been getting any sleep. I've been under a lot of stress. I pushed my body really hard, last week's race and then 2 weeks before that. But interesting thing is I saw a guy at the race, and he had this tattoo on his back, and it was a zipper where his kidney area is. A zipper was open and a picture of a kidney. And I said, "Oh, wow, did you lose a kidney?" He said, "I donated one." And we chatted a little bit, because that's something I've always wanted to do, is donate a kidney. I just think it'd be a really cool thing to do, because there's people, my daughter's type 1 diabetic. At some point, she may need a new kidney. Well, my wife has always said, okay, let's say you donate a kidney, and then suddenly Eden needs one, and you only have one now because you gave one away. and you're the only match.
Yeah.
Well, the thing, and this guy reiterated to me, he said, when you do that, when you donate, automatically, if a family member, a close family member needs an organ, they get pushed to the top because you already donated into the bank. So I'm actually, these kind of made me rethink that I might donate a kidney. I think that'd just be a really fun, cool thing to do and get that into the bank for someone who needs it now. And then if my daughter does need work, any family member needs an organ down the road. Because what if I'm not organ compatible with her? Automatically, she gets pushed to the top of the list just because I donated into the system. So it could actually benefit her. Anyway, that's kind of a side note. But then I was thinking, I lose a kidney. I also lose an adrenal gland. And maybe I can't afford to lose one of my adrenal glands. I think I can do fine with one kidney. I've never had any kidney issues in my races. So I think, but losing one of my 2 adrenal glands, that may not be so good. I don't know.
No, I mean, you get into those kind of things like, donating blood. The problem is, and I tell athletes is like, if you're an endurance athlete, you really shouldn't be donating blood. Well, you can, but you're basically just saying, here's months of training. There you go, because you're just gonna. I mean,
all that hemoglobin you've given away.
I mean, you have to. I mean, maybe it's sounding selfish, but yeah. And speaking of, you can. On a couple of our podcasts, there's a shorter version of Ed talks about running his last 100-miler wearing 2 Left Ultras, and that's on YouTube. So if people just want to hear that little 5-10 minute podcast, I've been taking snippets out of the podcast. So those are available. And I took a snippet out. Our biggest viewed right now is the Annie and Jester on Kelly Agnew, aka the Porta Potty Cheat. That's been going up the charts.
Yeah, how funny. Oh, and I saw our friend Steven was out at this race.
Yes,
Steven from we ran with him at ATY and Silverton. So now I ran with Steven at a race in Colorado and Arizona and Kentucky. But he gave me a ride to the airport, so we got a chance to chat. He's, it's funny, in California, kind of a goal race is Western States or Bauer. That's the goal races. Well, guess what race anybody in Tennessee does? It's Vol State. And so you see all these 314 stickers on the back of people's cars because they've done Vol State. Steven has crewed at Bowater, hasn't done it, but he's done Vol State 3 times screwed and 1 time crewed. And so I got a chance to pick his brain a little bit and even more excited about. And I was on the wait list this year for Vol State, and I didn't get called up for it. But it's in the past it's been a conflict with Badwater because they are always about the same time. This year they could be done. They were far enough apart. Yeah. But that's kind of really motivated me. But we got a chance to kind of catch up and chat a bit. And he's going back to ATY, and I was saying, well, Andy. Not sure he's going to go back or not because sometimes you say I'll never go back. Sometimes
I won't go. I won't go back until stuff's acknowledged what happened. And they never did. So you won't see me at any Air event. And I've been about that in the podcast. No, because it's just Actually, Steven wrote me and asked me about you before he went to race. He said, "Hey, I'm doing the last 12 hours," and I told him. I said, "Well, Ed's," because he asked me, "Is Ed there?" And I go, "Well, I didn't get a text that he missed the plane," and Ed's pretty good about being honest about he didn't make it to Cleveland or wherever you went. So I said, I assume he's at the race, but if you can hit him up and see if you can help him out, that'd be greatly appreciated.
And he did,
and he would have done that anyways. He would have done that anyways. He's a great guy. And Go ahead. Oh, I did my, he was out there doing across the years and doing his 300 miles. And, he was the long haul trucker that used to be really big and out of shape and then got really skinny and does races. And I don't think he's doing that now, but really great guy. So it's good to hear from him. So. Yeah.
And so he had said, Ed, I'm going to come back and do the night 12 hour so that, I can be out there and keep becoming this. Oh, that's so great. So then he shows up and I'm like, I'm sitting, and he's like, "What's going on?" "Oh, I'm done. I called 12." And so he went out and did. He didn't, do as much as he had thought he was going to do, but he was there and he'd chat a bit, go out and do some mileage. But funny thing is, as soon as the 12-hour race started, the night 12-hour, so the second half of the 12th and the 24th, torrential downpour, and it's like this is and under this easy up in a nice chair, not getting any rain. I'm thinking, this is the best decision I've ever made, because people are coming in going, oh my God, it's like suicide on that. It's so slick. They actually ended up, took a while for the husband and wife race directors, but they rerouted the worst part of it
Oh yeah.
to get them off of that. And people, because people are just like dropping like flies. They come in, hand in their chip, I'm done. I can't do that segment anymore. And I knew in my mind, yep, that would have been my going from a 13, 14 or 14 minute, 15 minute pace to a 20 or 25 minute pace, slipping and sliding up this hill. People were just, and people would come in and their butts all full of mud. Oh, there's someone took a tumble. There's someone fell on their butt, you know. Yeah, so deciding not to do that second 12 for so many reasons was just the right thing to do. I look back on it, it's like, yeah, I finally did something smart for a change.
Yeah, most definitely. Just you gotta, make a decision and then just own it and carry on for the next thing. So,
Yeah.
so it's like I said, he got a hold of me, and of course, one of my big fans, Scott Burton, Canadian guy who's done 6-day races with me. He often listens to my podcast, and I really appreciate. He often writes me questions and tips and things like that. And of course, he wrote, and I kind of sent it on to you, some of his ideas about your book and things like that. So hopefully you read that. It shows you read it. And he was also talking about the Patreon, how he thought that it'd be really cool to have you do like a monthly Zoom or some sort of thing where people can just, more like mindset coaching. And in fact, that's kind of what I was kind of trying to gravitate towards more, not like the problem when I was coaching is so many people got wrapped up into like, give me a schedule. And I'd be like, you can Google and find schedules galore, but if you're not following or paying attention to them, what's the point anyways? And so I said, I want to be more like a mindset kind of coach, and work with you on that end. And so his idea was kind of that, especially now when people are,
You know what we should do? My next race is 30 hours. If I can't get 100 miles in 30 hours, then I need to just quit having this idea of, I mean, it's not going to be a problem. But we should do a podcast in the race. I thought about this for the 24-hour races, but then I'm under too much pressure.
Yeah.
It was slowing down.
That's why I didn't even suggest it yet.
We could do it in the 30-hour, no problem. That actually could be kind of fun out on the course. And so we should think about that for next weekend.
Yeah, definitely kind of like, the wherever you're at when you get to, 90 miles or whatever hour it is, that kind of like bring you in the last, or like I don't sleep a lot, so maybe we'll figure something out, and also you got to figure out your phone situation and internet and battery life and all those kind of things. So but I like this kind of the idea Scott was talking about, doing the Zoom where you kind of have Zoom meetings, but also it could almost be like you could, especially if they're training on a treadmill, which I know Scott does a lot, kind of do a Zoom workout with the person, almost
a group.
Yeah.
Oh, like the Paleon.
Yeah.
What was it called? The cycling thing that they do. Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
That would be fun.
And so there's just kind of ideas, but you got to look into those. So so those were kind of the things I just kind of brought up, and I also wanted to tell people that your Chase the Jester across California, you can sign up. That's all the way till the end of the year. For a lot of you who are doing other virtual races that are kind of winding down at the end of the month, definitely check into possibly doing your races. You got the gold one up the coast with 600 miles.
Andy, they're not virtual races; they're virtual runs.
Virtual runs. Virtual runs with a nice medal.
Yes, yeah. It's a 5-inch in the shape of California, and there's the bronze, silver, and gold, or the combination, or the triple crown, which you're going to get all three plus a triple Jester crown. So
But those
people want to go and sign up for that. Chase the Jester across California. Look that up, and you can find that. Yeah.
I put those links into the show notes. They're in the podcast. I can put some hyperlinks on the podcast, the audio version, and then I usually also throw it onto the YouTube. The only problem is with the YouTube, you can't throw in the hyperlinks. You have to just put in an ugly link. Like you can't make it say Chase the Jester and then make it a hyperlink so people can click on it. You have to put you have to like Chase the Jester and below it put the URL. But at least does make a hyperlink in the comments. So just wanted people to know, be aware of that, and we may be doing something towards the end of the month with that.
And something else we could do too is if you do decide to do that, you can use a promo code NOISE for Andy Noise, NOISE 10, get a $10 discount. Not only does it give you a $10 discount, but it helps us know if people, by hearing about this from this podcast, if they signed up for it.
And I put that in the show notes.
Okay.
That the use Noise 10 coupon. So anyways, we've been just all over the place. So I think we talked about where you're going next week to the race in Georgia, is it? Yeah. So you got that, the Southern Discomfort, Albany, Georgia. And you're going to be, it looks like you're going to be flying out again, though, unfortunately, like on a Friday again.
Yeah, I got to look at my schedule, but I think I've cushioned myself a little more time. I'm not packing it quite so tight, and I'll get in and have time to get a good night's sleep the night before. So, flying out of San Diego Friday afternoon, I believe. Yeah. Yeah,
that's the thing. I mean, I've been racing since high school, and the problem is really it's not the day before sleep; it's the days
night before.
Because a couple of days. Because the problem with the day before sleep is you're kind of amped up and
not gonna get much sleep anyway.
Anyways, but it's the race on Saturday. It's the Wednesday, Thursday sleep, and you were definitely cheating. Cheating the world, cheating the sleep gods when you were pulling off. So hopefully, hopefully you're going to be able to get back. I was just looking at the entrance list here, and there's only like 6 people in the 24, but there's quite a number of people, another 30 or 40 in the 30
that's
hour.
One of the reasons why I choose to do the 30, because I saw originally, I thought, I can go out and do the 24. Why stay out for 6 more hours when it's a flat 1 mile loop, which is my forte? I should use the bill, knock out 100 miles within 24 hours. But then I saw 6 people. I thought, that's they wouldn't cancel it because they've got enough of the 30. But then I also want to have some competition, and I want to show up on Ultra Sign Up. And sometimes if there's less than 10 people, they'll push it all the way to the bottom as like with an asterisk. Whereas if there's 10 or more in the race, it shows in the listing. Plus, if I win, you get 100% on Ultra signups, and if it's pushed down in that lower category, even if you win, you don't get any. You don't get the percentage. And I'm trying to boost my percent up a little bit. So but the 30 hours should be a lot of fun. And there's, I think, when I looked, 23 people. Jamila, I've been with her before. She's the only one that I recognized. Although, interesting thing, there's a guy, Jeff. He's in his 70s. He's from Lafayette, which is, Bay Area, California. He was out there in this race this weekend. And then a friend, Eugene, who I think he's 83, he's from Illinois. He was here this weekend. Well, Jeff's going to be at Discomfort. And then at the Angry Ellen, Oregon, Eugene and Jeff will both be there as well. Now, these guys are cool because, again, 70 and 80, and if you look at their Ultra signups, they've got they don't do hundreds anymore, but they go out and they'll knock out a 50K.
Yeah,
and they'll
I know Jeff. I know Jeff real well. Yeah,
but he's got close to 300 ultras, and Eugene, if I remember right, he's got maybe 400 or 500 ultras. But the guy, and he's 83 and still in really good shape. I look at him, I'm like, I want to be able to, when I'm that age, I want to first off live to be 83. And he's, slipping and sliding. He finished what he wanted before the rains came, but still, he's going up this slippery trail and slipping and sliding like all the rest of us. He's not falling on his butt. He's still spry and able to, maneuver himself. And it's like, okay, I want to be that guy. And who's our buddy who's as tough as nails? He's from California. He always wears the button-down shirt. In 77.
Bill
Dickey, yes.
Yep.
77, that guy's as tough as they come. So I look at those 3 guys, and they're not all hunched over, walking around with the walker. And they're in great shape, and they can't do what they used to do, but they don't live in the glory days. They live at where they're at now. Yep. And they're out there to have fun and to socialize and to laugh it up and have a good time. It's
I was looking
that's what I want to do.
Jeff, run into him at many races. He goes all over the place, definitely. Because I imagine retired, and that's kind of like my whole motto. Stay healthy, be boring, not epic. And partly, and that's what I'm always telling people, that you want to, and it's good that like you this weekend are acknowledging that and stopped, because if you want to make it to where they're at, you can't just kill yourself all the time now. And we've seen lots of, the ultra world is littered with, people that are, no longer with us in terms of competing. And, Jeff Rose, Rob Carr, you heard about him lately? Timothy
No, I
Olson,
haven't.
Timothy Olson, tons of those guys.
Scott Jurek,
Yeah,
he's not doing any racing anymore. And
Yeah.
Tracy, bless her
Yeah.
heart, she
Yeah.
shows up at races and walks really.
Yeah.
I mean, she's there,
Yeah.
and everybody loves her because she's a legend. But she can't, and she's barely older than us by like only a year or two.
And I
But,
but I tell people, yeah, that's why you gotta like, call it a day, because, don't look at it what you want to do later in the future. And that's kind of one of the reasons I kind of gravitate towards walking more. I don't want to get to the point where I'm forced to walk. And you see those guys that are races and they can't really even walk well because they just ran too long, and then now they're just, and so, it's good lessons. But yeah, Jeff and those guys are definitely fun to be around. Bill Dickey. I've always had great times with Bill. Some memorable moments when we were at the Dome, 6 days in the Dome indoors, so that hellacious thing, and it was so adorable. Every day he'd get a cup of coffee and he'd walk over by the door, and it had a little 1-foot window, and he would just look outside like a little
like in
kid.
prison.
Yeah, or like a little kid, kindergarten, hoping to go outside. Yeah, because that was like the most insane place, because they never turned the lights off, and it's if it was a psychological experiment, everyone would have been arrested. Like, this is inhumane. You can't do this to people.
Yeah.
And that was another race where I kind of bailed. I ended up doing like 270. I mean, I went up there with visions in my head of 400 and blew up spectacularly. Blew out my quads for the first time in my life. Just lots of things like that. So anyways, but yeah, I
remember I even let you a pair of my Ultra shoes because your shoes weren't working for you.
Well, no, my shoes, I had a brand new pair, and they looked like you'd use them on a sander belt. You rounded the corners off because that track was so hard. It was like sandpaper. I finally figured out that 400-meter races, kind of like you find out, like, this doesn't work for me, and do what works for you and do what's fun. Yeah.
And you just remind me, I forgot about it until you mentioned about that, but remember, it didn't have any padding.
Yeah.
And so I actually got shin splints at that on that rubberized course because the saucers are rubber, but what they're supposed to do is put like when they build them outside, they build a cushioning underneath it, and this didn't have it. It was like on concrete. So anyway.
Well, Dave Johnson was from Alaska, said it was like running in a giant Costco. Because it was concrete, because Costco has concrete floors, and they put a tiny little rubber mat on the track, and it was hard as anything. I mean, to this day, my quads still have issues, and I never had them before that, but I just blew them out. There was just times where I just had to sit down, and the only thing that kept me going is I wanted to stay in front of that one guy, Joel Gatt. So I had to stay in front of him. And speaking of people, Joshua Holmes, you brought up, he always says about that race, he goes, "That's where I had my PW, my personal worst." He did like a 36-hour 100 or something. He just got destroyed there. So some people did really well there, and other people, boy, I'll tell you. So, well, it sounds good. I think we got quite a bit done here, and I saw you yawning, so hopefully maybe you'll go lay down and get some sleep, huh? Well,
I'll catch up on some sleep. Yeah.
And you're flying
I'll find a quiet corner someplace in this being banned at the, what'd you call it? The outer, the outer perimeter or whatever. Yeah. I'm banned to that until they'll let me, till they'll let me get my boarding pass and go inside the TSA checkpoint.
But you can't go in. Your flight doesn't leave till tomorro?
Tomorrow afternoon.
Oh yeah. Cause it is Sunday. I don't even, with this COVID, it's so hard to even know what day's what. So you're not going to go out and visit. Now, are you in Cleveland or Cincinnati? You said two different things.
I'm in Cincinnati. If I said Cleveland, that was a mistake. Actually, they call it Cleveland International Airport. It's actually in Kentucky. It's in Covington, Kentucky, but it's like right there on the border. So they call it Cincinnati, and it's weird. It's not even in Ohio. But anyway.
Okay, so when I was talking about Cleveland, you really weren't in Cleveland, and you're saying Cincinnati. So, oh boy. So, okay, well, I think we'll wrap this up, and we'll definitely probably talk next Friday, if not sooner. And it's been an adventure. I'm glad that and I think people get stuff out of this, and it's cool that some people are saying, "Hey, I saw the podcast or the videos and stuff." So. As always, my thing is, stay healthy, be boring and not epic. And I'll throw you to end the podcast, Ed. What's up?
Be kind to each other. Be gentle on yourself. Take one step today that can change the world tomorrow for good. Love you all. Group hugs, everybody. And be safe out there.
Yeah. See you later, Ed.